Welcome to the Real Estate Syndication Show. Whether you are a seasoned investor or building a new real estate business, this is the show for you. Whitney Sewell talks to top experts in the business. Our goal is to help you master real estate syndication. And now your host, Whitney Sewell.
This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today our guest is Brian Bradley. Thanks for being on the show, Brian.
Hey, thanks, Whitney, for having me on and putting this podcast together. And I think we're going to have a pretty interesting topic for everybody, especially those syndicating deals that are, looking to grow beyond those LLCs and what to do about it. I just hope that I can add some value to the people listening here on how to protect what you got and how to grow.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Brian. And I want to remind the listeners as well to go to lifebridgecapital.com, where you can go to the contact us page and connect with me personally. We'll reach out to you. But a little about Brian. He is a leading educator and asset protection attorney for high-risk professionals, entrepreneurs, and investors. Focuses on setting up strategic teams and systems to protect clients' assets. Selected to the Super Lawyers Rising Star list, Lawyer of Distinction list, and nominated to America's Top 100 High-Stake Litigators list. So, Brian, thank you again for your time today, but give the listeners a little more about who you are, what you do, and let's dive in.
Yeah, no problem. Like you said, I'm an asset protection attorney, and I got into asset protection from the litigation side of the law and having people being sued and, their lives just being turned completely upside down. And they all had a false sense of security, like, oh, I had insurance and I thought they were going to cover everything, or I had a revocable living trust. I don't understand why that's not protecting me. And they didn't understand that, it's the insurance job to wiggle out and create separation in lawsuits. And a revocable living trust is just there for when you die to pass on your assets to who you designate as a beneficiary. And it's like, I wish I could have done something beforehand. And I just got tired of hearing that same old story come through my door. And I wanted to be proactive, and I always liked money and investing myself. And I just said, I need to make a transition in my practice to match my interest with what I see as a client's need and just be proactive. And so I started adding the asset protection realm into my practice. And so, it really ties in with your listeners. And as your listeners are investing, and they're starting to become accredited investors and syndicators, they're going to eventually outgrow just basic systems and like LLCs. And so they need to have a little bit more protection. And so what I do is really provide asset protection, just peace of mind is what it is. We do this by setting up systems and teams using, legal entities like LLCs or asset management, limited partnerships, and different types of trust and exemptions, which we'll break down later on today. All while trying to keep in mind the overall goal really is just lifestyle preservation, peace of mind, and then changing the way predators view you. And then separating out ownership and liability. Rich people don't own things in their own personal name. Businesses or trusts do. You still want to enjoy them and benefit from them. You just don't want to have all the liability directly attached to your name from them. And so clients don't want to be stressed out about their financial security. And that's what you go to asset protection attorneys like me for. And then my practice just specifically focuses on that 1 million kind of net worth or more clients who you're accredited, and you need a little bit higher protection than what you started with when you first started investing.
All right, Brian. So, you had mentioned like asset protection is really peace of mind, but when do we need to be thinking about asset protection? I know you said, you mentioned in your example of those other people, well, I wish I, could have helped you earlier. I wish I would have known this earlier, or those types of things you were hearing. Well, when do we need to be thinking about this?
I think the second that you decide I'm going to invest in something that can go boom, or has a key and someone can get hurt, you need to start thinking about, how do I protect myself? Because one, you own something, you're going to be viewed as deep pockets. You're renting to somebody, you're going to be viewed as deep pockets. And, the weird thing is always the unknown that can come and that's going to bite you the biggest in the butt, or the things that you don't know that you don't know. And so as you start investing, you're going to make a lot, or starting a business, you're going to make a lot of errors in the beginning. And those are the crucial times that people generally don't go seek asset protection or lawyers. They try to do it all themselves, and they have really expensive learning experiences. And so I would say the second you decide to open up a business, or you start having enough money to go buy another property, you need to start thinking about how to protect it. And then I wouldn't say go spend $30,000 or $100,000 on something to protect one unit, that's crazy. But you can start small and scale up as you go and just realize what I start isn't where I'm going to end.
Okay. So, maybe before we're jumping in as an operator or maybe even a limited partner as a passive investor, like what do we need to be thinking about? We're fixing to invest in a deal. What does the passive investor need to be thinking about? You mentioned, okay, I'm fixing to invest in something that could go boom or, anything like that. What do I need to think about or have in place before I invest?
Yeah, I would say like in any business structure, have your business entity set up. So if you're just starting out, money's tight, an LLC is always a good starting point. So create an LLC. There's not limitations, but it's kind of what we call maybe protection. It's more of a deterrent. It says it in its name, limited. So you have limited personal protection from it. And then it depends on state by state with charging orders, what assets they can reach through you if pierced. But that's a great entry point, an LLC. I would say if you're just starting out investing, try to have 2 LLCs, one to just hold whatever you're investing in, and then another one to operate out of. And that way you're creating more degrees of separation from yourself. And then as money starts coming in passively and you start getting more and more assets, a common thing that people do is I'm going to add another LLC or another LLC. And that eventually can just get crazy and very expensive. So that's when you hit that $500,000 net worth mark and you're making about $200,000 probably annually, you would start thinking about higher levels of protection that's more streamlined instead of just adding more and more cost to maintain your protection.
Okay. So, all right. So thinking about having 2 LLCs, at least have one, right?
Yeah,
to get started.
at least have one. That's something. Yeah.
Yeah. And have one that maybe you operate out of, and then another that actually holds the property. And so maybe the one that you're operating out of is kind of the business name, the one everybody sees, but there's a different entity that actually holds the properties that you're investing in or purchasing.
Correct.
Okay. And so then you mentioned when we get to that $500,000 net worth, there's, we need to be thinking differently then. And what does that look like?
Yeah. So then you're going to start seeing money grow a lot faster. And so when you hit that $500,000 mark, it's going to be easier to turn it into $1 million, but one lawsuit can completely wipe you out. And so generally you want to keep the equity in one LLC below $500,000, but that's kind of hard nowadays, especially if you live in like California. It's going to be virtually impossible. So you want to try to keep it below $1 million. And then that's where it starts going into splitting up equity, which is, your assets into different LLC structures. But as you start growing, that just gets really expensive. And so what I recommend there is you start looking into what we do, higher forms of asset protection, which is called an asset management limited partnership. And so these have split delineations of ownership. And so there's a general partnership ownership, and then there's a minority partner ownership. And so these allow you to place all of your assets on your LLCs into the general partner ownership piece of it. And then that's what's going to be owning that aspect. And then you can also put in different assets you have like cash, stock, bonds, and whatever into the AMLP. And then once you turn about that $1 million mark, you can then come back in with what we call a bridge trust, which we'll break down later on. It's an offshore asset protection trust, but it's also domestic. And then that comes into the minority ownership share. And then that's the asset protection, ironclad, gold standard throughout the world of go pound sand. We don't care what you do. And so as you start scaling, if you listen to this podcast, you'll see how start with an LLC, there's an ending point of a potential bridge trust. The middle gap is an AMLP, and then you just synchronize yourself as you grow into it.
Okay. I would have to schedule a call with you sometime to understand some of that.
No, we'll break it down really simple, real quick.
Let's do it.
Yeah. And so if you want, I think before we jump into, the trust, I think one thing I'd like to talk about, which most people probably never heard of, is just called exemptions. And so no matter what you own, you're syndicating, you're whatever, there's things called exemptions. And if you're looking for asset protection, besides going offshore, the most powerful thing that you can have is an asset that's been exempt from a lawsuit. Think of O.J. Simpson. He was sued civilly, completely wiped out, but he was able to keep his Florida mansion and his NFL pension because they were state and federally exempt from lawsuits. Same thing with like 401ks. And so exemption planning is one of the main staples, but it's the least understood because they're not used that much, because there's not much money for financial advisors and CPAs to make out of them. They're not taught them, so they don't know about them on their legal solutions. Lawyers generally try to put everybody into a perfect little cookie cutter LLC. They're not taught them in law school. So unless they fall into, a high degree level firm that does asset protection at a high level, they're not taught them. So most people don't even know these exemptions exist. And the first reason I like to start with them is it's a state given legal right. So you always want to claim and max out those state rights first and your federal rights first. Second, you're starting to see the weakening of out-of-state asset protection trusts. For example, there's a California case in Kilker versus Stillman in 2012. It completely disregarded a Nevada asset protection trust for a California resident. And so we're seeing this more and more throughout the nation. And so we prefer to start with exemptions and maxing out those first, and then moving on to using stronger offshore jurisdictions like offshore asset protection trust if and when they're needed. And now exemptions are going to vary state by state. And a few really good examples I just went over a couple with the O.J. Simpson example, and then Florida homestead exemptions. Your home, regardless of its value, is going to be absolutely protected in Florida, regardless of of its value, if it's within 1/4 of an acre. That's an example of an exemption. And another really huge one for your California listeners, and I'm sure you got a lot of California listeners out there, is what's called a private retirement plan. And California is the only state to grant full exemption protection, and it's full exemption protection for any asset that qualifies for being placed in this private retirement plan, if their purpose is to protect those assets for their retirement. But generally, that's the main reason why 90% of my people that call in are investing is down the road for their retirement. And this specific exemption was codified in the 70s, so for over 40 years ago. So it has a really strong case law history. And you can protect cash, stock, bonds, real estate, life insurance or portfolios, corporate stock, your LLC membership interest. And so if you're a California resident, I think that you guys need to look this up and learn about it. It's CCP section 704.115, because you're not going to hear about it anywhere else. And it's one of the only main exemptions that you have to protect any asset essentially that you have.
Wow. So, but tell me, how do we, you mentioned like people, CPAs or a lot of attorneys aren't taught these things, or exemption planning. How do we find somebody that we know is qualified to help us with something like this?
It's a good question. It's a hard question to answer. Is a lot of attorneys, I spend a lot of my time talking to our continuing legal and teaching continuing legal education courses on exemption planning and things like that. So it's just a matter of once law students and attorneys start picking up asset protection in their practice, they start learning about them through continuing education, saying, oh, I didn't know about that. I didn't know about this. And that's why I spend a lot of my time talking about that. For the listeners out there, unless you hear about it, you're not going to know about it. So it's one of those really hard things to say, hey, what is out there? What's really strong and what's not? I have some clients that are like, man, I just created this. I wish I heard your podcast a week ago. I'm like, yeah, sorry.
Wow. Okay. So, maybe reach out to you, or we find somebody that can help us through this, or it can help us to plan for some of the exemptions. But, that asset protection trust that you were talking about, let's elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah. So let's jump in. So I'm going to break that down through a talk of jurisdiction. And then the way I want to do it is compare offshore versus domestic. And then is there a way to connect the two together? That way we get a really good landscape of how it, the whole piece of the pie works together. And so jurisdiction means the laws and rules that govern you and trust and business entities are different from one jurisdiction to another. And this means from one state to another or one country to another. Just think of like old, crime movies and TV shows where, some dead body falls on the ground right at the county lines, and, the two counties are fighting over who's the head cop on the job. That's jurisdiction. And so you have two options when you're picking out a jurisdiction. You can establish these trusts domestically here in the US, for example, in Nevada, or you can set them up offshores in another country like the Cook Islands. I personally prefer going offshore if and when it's ever needed. And it's simply because it's the best home court advantage, especially for your higher net worth individuals. It makes lawsuits go away very, very fast. and exceptionally quickly, and it resolves them for literally pennies on the dollar, even against what we call super creditors like the IRS and the SEC. And so the power of a foreign offshore trust like in the Cook Islands is that it has what's called statutory non-recognition of any other jurisdiction court orders. That's what these trusts were specifically drafted for, and their constitution and statute drafted for in the 80s. And so what this means is that your US judgment is going to be completely worthless in the Cook Islands. You'd have to go and start your case all over from scratch, facing the highest legal standard in the world, the murder standard, which is beyond a reasonable doubt. The plaintiff is going to have to front all the court costs and fly in a judge from New Zealand, and you can't bring your US attorneys with you there. If you lose, they pay. And so when they're trying to prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt, they're most likely going to lose. And there's only a 1-year statute of limitations there. So by the time they even realized they had to sue you in the Cook Islands, they'd most likely already missed a chance to swing at the ball. And but there's pros and cons to everything. I don't think that you can always just paint a rosy picture. And so if you're purely foreign, meaning offshore, like in the Cook Islands, it's going to be very effective. 5 out of 5 stars. Nothing really gets better than statutory non-recognition. But on the other 3 factors that clients want, control, cost, and compliance, it's going to fall a little bit short. And so for a foreign asset protection trust to work, you got to be out of control and subject to a foreign trustee. The annual maintenance costs are going to be really high. We've seen up to like $10,000. And if you're purely foreign, you also have a lot of IRS reporting and disclosures to file, like forms 3520s and 3528s. And so we only have about 5% of our clients that have to go purely foreign. It's just really extreme. But if we compare this to the domestic side, purely domestic asset protection trust are going to be less expensive. The cost is going to be less. The maintenance fees are going to be less, but they fail on effectiveness and control. They fail because of the foundation of asset protection. And the foundation is to just not recognize another jurisdictional court orders. But the hallmark of our legal system in the US is the Constitution, and we have the full faith and credit clause, meaning you can't run from judgments in the US. And so what we're seeing now also is a pattern of domestic asset protection trust being pierced, like I mentioned before. And so we have high profile cases like In re Hubbard 2013, Dale versus Dale 2015, Tony 1 versus Wacker, and more. Of course, just completely disregarding clients using domestic asset protection trust or going to other states like California, residents using Nevada asset protection trust. They're just ignoring the choice of law clause. And so when we look at the landscape now, power of offshore with the cost, the risk of lack of power and strength, but cost efficiency domestically, excuse me, which do I pick? And so if you're one of my clients or my affiliates clients, we just say neither. We use what's called a bridge trust, and it's a hybrid, and it's a domestic and a foreign asset protection trust. And we're just combining the best of both worlds. It was created over 30 years ago, and we're just using the word bridge to demonstrate conceptually how we're using a foreign trust in another island, connecting 2 countries together. And we just cross the bridge when we need to, when you're under a state of duress. And for your CPAs and lawyer listeners out there who really like to geek out, or other people who like to geek out on some of the detail of it, the bridge trust is a grantor trust. What this means is that you, the creator of the trust, retain some of the power for it. And like all asset protection trusts are self-settled spendthrift trusts. And what this means is it's created by you, for you, as your own beneficiary. And then the win-win here for tax purposes, and excuse me, I have a little cough right now. The win-win here for purposes and for the IRS is that you don't have as many of the disclosures. Your bridge trust is actually going to be considered domestic, not foreign. And that's because we drafted to specifically comply with USC section 7701. And so what this means is that you don't have all of those specific tax disclosures that you have to do in IRS reportings. And so what this means also is that you get the simplicity of a domestic asset protection trust with the strength and power of the Cook Islands foreign trust in your back pocket, if and when you ever need it.
Tell me about setting something like this up is not something that's done for, I would say, most people every day, but, until you're looking at investing, maybe you've gained some higher net worth or it's growing. But, tell me about the relationship between somebody like yourself that's helping us set this stuff up, but then also, like with our CPA or, when we're thinking about setting these types of things up, is the same CPA going to work for us?
It may not. Sometimes we have to actually work with the CPA. And one thing they understand is any asset protection is tax neutral. And so it's really actually when you're creating these asset protection trusts, the offshore ones, you actually have less tax filings than you would if you didn't have it. So it actually simplifies your life a lot more. But we work with the CPAs. Sometimes CPAs are just really passive and have no idea what's going on, and they don't want to know. And so as you grow, you may outgrow your CPA. I outgrew one of my CPAs. I have a great business CPA, but he's not really good at real estate investment. So I had to go find one that's good with my law practice and my business plus real estate investing. And so that's just part of life. So we have a great network of CPAs and financial advisors that will help along, the route there. Some people come in without having a CPA, and that's part of building the team and the system is, hey, you can't do this on your own. Let's get you in, you get a good CPA, get a good financial advisor, start making your money, make money, find missing dollars, missing tax credits, missing tax benefits. Let's get a better protection system. And that's just part of the game.
Nice. So, thinking more about, our estate planning and things like that, help me to, I guess, before we run out of time, give us just a few tips about our estate planning and protecting our assets and for better taxes planning and things like that.
Yeah, I say just don't do it alone. Time is short. So when you're looking for anything, especially in the asset protection realm, think of the acronym ECCM: effectiveness, cost, control, maintenance. Effectiveness, you want it to work. Cost, you can't outspend your budget, but it has to be able to be flexible and to grow with it. Maintenance fees has to be the same. So when you start filtering through what you're going to do through ECCM, you're going to be like, okay, is this effective? Is the cost reasonable? Am I going to have some sort of control over my investments? Yes. Maintenance fees fits in. Okay, great. You're going to probably end up a lot better. Then you start looking through the eyes of, is this full protection or maybe protection? Where am I now on the balancing? And one spectrum may end up higher than the other on another time. And just realize as you grow, what you have may not be where you end. And then the other part of it, I would say, is don't think you can even possibly DIY this on your own. Don't even try to, I'm going to go create an LLC and I can create it for $100 online on my own. Well, you know how many times I've pierced through those when I had to go sue somebody? It's a joke. Because you're not creating them properly. They're not created to protect you. The proper clauses aren't in there. They're just general, templates. So don't think just because you did a good Google search, you're going to be able to create something properly. Same thing with your CPAs. If you have a CPA, great. Find one that works with your life. Say financial advisor. If you don't, get one. Don't manage your own taxes. Work with your professionals and you'll make more money.
So what happens? I know a lot of the listeners right now are thinking, "Oh no, I've already created my LLC," or what do we do?
We may end up not using it and just creating another one. It just depends. I might be able to fix, some of the operating agreements, just depends on what went wrong. Articles of incorporation, we can always refile, or if you're like, I just recreated this and I created it on my own, sometimes you may just have to let that entity go, write it off as a tax loss, and then recreate one properly. And the great thing is when you're doing asset protection, it's also a business expense. So you can get a good percentage of that written off on your taxes.
Okay. So, and the most important, you hit the nail on the head when you said, work with professionals. You're going to make more money by working with professionals, and somebody that's an expert in tax, somebody that's an expert in asset protection, just like yourself. And no doubt about it. There's no way I have time to become an expert in asset protection. And that's why I'm going to rely on somebody like yourself. And
I think the hardest thing of it is because, the mindset is probably a lot of these are, self-built people. And so you're used to relying and learning on yourself and doing everything on your own. But if you keep doing all this on your own, you're taking away from the time of what you're good at. Do what you're good at. Go find deals, go close deals, do your day job. If you're a doctor and you're investing, go be a good doctor and go to find good deals. Let your team find a good team. Sometimes you'll have to replace team members, but that's part of being a business owner. Let the tax guys handle your taxes. Let the protection guys protect you, create the systems, and you're going to end up, taking a dollar a lot farther.
Nice. Okay, Brian, well, just a few more questions before we run out of time, but what's a way that you have recently improved your business that we could apply to ours?
I got away from the old way of how law firms do business. I don't have employee, like associate employees full-time that I have to pay somebody annually for. And so I actually because I'm very entrepreneurial. And I came out of law school during the worst recession besides the Great Depression, when there was no money and no jobs. And so I had to learn how to make a dollar, go a lot farther. And I realized I can have more business-minded attorneys come in and work for me and hire them on a project basis. And so I think that's a great way to start people, expanding capital if, you're in business. And that's what I did, was I affiliate with other large firms for the production document side who've been around for 100 years and do really good work. And I just do what I'm good at, going into court and talking and, talking about the law. And when people do get sued, going into court representing them. And so I just learned I don't need to have a physical location unless, I have to go into court, but I also don't need to be subject to a massive payroll.
So tell me the one thing that's contributed to your success.
The one, I think just my drive. I'm not afraid of failing at all. I just look at failure as the sooner I fail, the quicker I'll learn from it. And, I stick my neck out, if I get punched in the face, great, learn to duck and dodge and move and pivot and just keep going.
I love that. Yep. I'm similar in that way. The quicker you get punched in the face, the quicker you don't get punched the next time.
Exactly. I think that people get stuck in analysis paralysis. Like, I need to read one more book. I need to do one more thing. I have to. And eventually it's like, all the books are the same. You're not going to read anything different. And the next thing is just jump in, and, life experience is going to teach you the most.
All right, Brian, well, how do you like to give back?
What's that?
How do you like to give back?
I really like to give back to my community. I represent a lot of people for free. I coming out of law school from that, that time, I actually had to work for free for 3 years just to get into court. And so, I was knocking on every state organization door, like, I'll represent your clients for free. And it's just something I never lost. I just like the face of someone saying, like, you're going to, what? And I'm like, no, like, I like your case and I like you, and I know money might be tight. I'm not going to say you're going to call me. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to represent everybody for free. But I just look at who needs help. I call up different organizations, see what cases I like, who needs what. And then I'll say, all right, you cover the court costs, and I'm going to go in and represent you.
Wow. Well, Brian, this has been a great show. I know you've definitely gone in depth on things that I haven't thought about enough about. And it's really pushing me to think more about who's helping me with my asset protection. And I hope the listeners are thinking the same way. And, who's on your team that's, somebody like Brian. But tell them how they can get in touch with somebody like yourself or you.
Yeah, thanks. So you can jump on my website, www.btblegal.com. I have a lot of educational information on there, and videos and smart calculators. I do free consultations for clients, especially like your listeners here. I just rather have people jump on, do the calculations, talk to me, see what my thoughts are. Even if you go somewhere else and find someone to do what I say cheaper, great. I'd rather have you have accurate information and not be afraid to pick up a phone and talk to a lawyer because you're afraid of the consultation fee. And so I just have always just said, come in, call, email. When I can get to you, I'll talk to you. And, jump on my website, go through all the education, email me, and I'm on LinkedIn.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Syndication Show, brought to you by Life Bridge Capital. Life Bridge Capital works with investors nationwide to invest in real estate, while also donating 50% of its profits to assist parents who are committing to adoption. Life Bridge Capital, making a difference, one investor and one child at a time. Connect online at www.lifebridgecapital.com for free material and videos to further your success.